Yeah, thank you all so much for joining us for this Meet the Nominee Q&A event with Janet Tarlov. Janet, thank you so much for joining us. I will introduce my co-hosts for the evening, Leanne Cheng and Evan Orevek. Leanne is works on Vision Zero advocacy at Walk SF, and Evan is the advocacy manager there at Walk SF. Bike Coalition wanted to be here, but they're with us in spirit today. They have their annual meeting conflicting today. But they wanted to say that they wish they could be here, and they did submit questions for Janet as well. So with that, I will hand it over to Leanne.
Thanks so much, Dylan. Yeah, so excited to be here with our latest nominee tonight, Janet Tarlov. She founded and owned Canyon Market, a grocery store in Glen Park, for over 16 years until they sold it to Gus's. And she's currently the president of the Glen Park Merchants Association. She's also the vice president of the SF Council of District Merchant Association, so Association of Associations, and she also chairs the council's legislative committee there. And she lives in the Castro, where she frequently walks, and in recent years she often gets around the city by bike. Tarlov also drives, especially if it's raining, and she has several favorite Muni lines, including the 24 to get to Bernal or to Geary, the 35 Eureka, and especially when her kids were younger, frequently rode with them on the K, L, and M into downtown. So we don't want to take too much of a time on bio, but that is Janet Tarlov in a nutshell. And I'm going to turn things over to Janet to introduce herself in her own words.
Sure. Thank you very much, Leanne. And thank you, everybody. I really think that it's wonderful that these organizations not only collaborate to do this, but the fact that it's being done is so smart. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Janet Tarlov, and I have been nominated to this seat on the MTA, and some of you may know that it is a seat that's specifically set aside for somebody from the merchant community. The gentleman who had it before me is a gentleman named Manny Yakutiel. So I am being nominated to complete his term, which ends in March, and then I will be considered for I guess it's reappointment at that time. So it's a bit of an unusual situation, but I'm very humbled and honored to have been named for this seat. I raised my hand in interest for it because I'm a business owner, as Leanne. I was formerly a business owner. My husband and I founded our business in 2006. It's a very busy neighborhood grocery store with a pretty large bakery and prepared foods and catering program. So we had quite a lot of employees for a business of our specific footprint, nearly 100 employees at certain points throughout the 16 years that we ran it. When I decided to submit my name for consideration, I had really come to the sudden realization that, well, first of all, I was really grateful that there was a merchant seat on the MTA board. Merchants in the commercial corridors are greatly impacted by decisions made at MTA, and in my experience, 16 years of running this store, I just realized more and more how impactful what we had to do every day was in terms of street management. So out of our employees, I would say a majority of them came to work using Muni or BART. Glen Park is a very transit-rich neighborhood. There are 7 bus lines, the J Church, and BART coming in to the neighborhood. Some of our employees did drive, so managing that with the parking restrictions and helping them through that was a lot of what we did, in addition to encouraging them to not park in spaces that we hoped customers would use. We received maybe between 12 and 20 deliveries in any given day from vehicles of all different sizes, from bike all the way up to an 18-wheeler. So managing that with parking and resident driveways and the bus line, the 35 bus line running down the same street, was something that we spent an awful lot of time doing. So the experience with the MTA was robust, intense, and I felt like I had my experience would be a benefit on the board. Oh, and then our customers coming to us either by bus, some by car, a lot on foot. It's a pretty dense neighborhood there, and a very I wouldn't say very walkable. It's pretty hilly, but a lot of people do walk to the downtown commercial corridor. So those I feel are my qualifications. Personally, I am a San Francisco resident for the last 33 years. I moved here in 1991, and I raised my children here with my husband. They are 23 and 25 now. And as Leanne mentioned, I spent a lot of time with them on transit when they were very small. I wanted them to become transit riders when they were adults, and I wanted them to I wanted to share the experience of being on transit with them. So that was something I was quite committed to, and I'm happy to report that they are frequent and passionate users of Muni. And also, as Leanne mentioned, I do cycle quite a bit. That's my primary way of getting around since we sold our store. Before that time, I really felt I needed a car close at hand near my workplace, because things came up during the day, whether it was taking an employee to urgent care or having to run out and get something that was urgently needed for the store. But I feel like I have the freedom now to get around the way I would have preferred to all along. And it's been pretty exciting to see the changes to the cycling environment in the interim time, because the previous time that I spent a lot of time cycling was when our children were small. Our family time, we didn't have traditional family time because of our business, but we rode with them on their bikes to school every day, all through elementary and middle school. And well, not so much through middle school. By the time they were able to take the bus by themselves, they were like, bye, Mom and Dad, this is too geeky to ride bikes with you. But anyway, so that's a little bit about me. And I'm really looking forward to hearing everyone's questions.
Whoop. Thank you so much, Janet. We're going to go into the questions now, and we have a couple of questions from each of the 3 orgs, and we're getting questions come in from the audience also, and so we're going to move to those as well. So the first 2 questions, and then I'm going to read them to you because Bike Coalition couldn't be with us in person tonight, but they're from the Bike Coalition. And the first one is about slow streets, and it is, now that the Slow Streets program is permanent, what's the best way for it to evolve and expand? How can slow streets best serve the needs of all San Francisco communities?
Wow. Okay. So um, I am a frequent user of the Sanchez Slow Street, and I am a big fan of the program. I'm not going to pretend that I understand all of the ins and outs of every slow street situation around the city, and I know that it has generated some controversy. I also know that the Slow Street program is a very important part of the Active Communities Plan. And I am I happen to think it's a very, very good idea to find ways to link up the city for walkers and cyclists, and that's a important part of future safety and achieving Vision Zero, which I think is also a very good plan. How to develop it? I don't feel that I have any particular expertise in that area. I've been a witness to the process that got it to formalized slow streets. I've been a user of one in particular and a number of others. Um, I just as a citizen observer, no, I have no particular expertise. I think that signage is hugely important, and the infrastructure around it is hugely important. I also think that it's very important for the slow streets to be embraced and utilized by the users of it, and it's a tricky entrance because people need to feel safe in order to do that, and they'll need to and so they won't do it until they do feel safe is what I imagine. So my best answer is whatever it can promote safety, encourage use of it, address concerns of people who feel that their route has been taken away or their access outside of their residence. Perhaps I don't know. I don't know what the controversies have been, but addressing people's concerns, understanding them is very, very important. And and I understand that as an MTA director, I'll be charged with making those decisions. And my style is very much an outreach style. I've been on the receiving end of not particularly good outreach and seeing an outcome, through various city agencies, not just MTA, that I want to foster a lot of good open communications and outreach to the various communities. Some communities I recognize are harder to reach. Merchants are one of them. We're very busy, and it's hard to get us to reply to an email, honestly. But I feel like I have one area where I people will respond to me, and then and I have a really sincere desire to be part of effective outreach in other communities that I'm not as familiar with.
Thank you for that. The other question from the Bike Coalition was about mode shift away from private vehicle use to other modes. And the question is, San Francisco has an ambitious goal of having 80% of our trips being by sustainable modes of travel by 2030. How will you support and encourage communities, including equity priority communities, to mode shift?
I guess and I'm just being introduced to all of these topics, but my my background is as a retailer. I'm used to encouraging people to buy things and adopt ideas, and that's something that has given me a tremendous amount of pleasure. MTA is a huge bureaucracy. And some of them may have run businesses, some of them may have run retail businesses, but or had a sales job or whatever, but that's all I do. So, it might be overly simplistic, but I think that it has to be desirable for the people to make the change, and change is hard. So people really need a lot of encouragement. I don't know what the opportunities are for giving people a taste that they may not have anticipated. But speaking for myself, this cycling is all the time is new for me, and the advent of the e-bike is really what got me into that lane. I live at the top of a pretty steep hill, and I'm fortunate to have the resources to get a bike like that. That's not something that's available to everybody, but why shouldn't it be? I mean, we have bike shares, we have a lot of opportunities for people to shift mode. I think that Muni, I've been taking Muni a lot more recently, since I've been named for this, and I've been tremendously impressed with the cleanliness and the the maintenance of the vehicles, and also the operators. I think there are thousands and thousands of people who have maybe an old idea about what any particular mode is going to be like. And so I think and there's just silly little things like if there's Clipper is a little confusing in my opinion, and there's it's just there are little barriers that I think that from the agency side may not be as well understood from the user side, that these might be contributions that I could make to the dialogue. So that's really all I have on that, but it's a great question.
Thank you so much. I think Dylan has questions from SFTR now, right?
That's right. Yeah, thank you, Janet. I wanted to start off, and I know you've watched some of the other candidate forums that we've done, so you might be prepared for this question, but I wanted to ask you, what does transit first mean to you, and how will you leverage your experience as a business owner to advance that vision as an SFMTA board member?
Oh, well, I owe a tremendous amount to Transit First, because when we were looking to open our business, the planning department allowed our project to move forward without a dedicated parking lot, which is normally required for a grocery store, because of the Transit First program. So that was pretty unusual back in 2006. It may be more common now, but literally we would not have been able to afford the mortgage on a property that had a dedicated parking lot. That would have been beyond our means. So that was a positive outcome of the Transit First initiative, and I realized that it has far-reaching the people that are involved with it, the agencies that are involved with it are, much more than MTA planning and specifically. So I am I'm going to be the first one to tell you I'm not an urban planner. I'm not a traffic engineer. I'm not a transit planner. But I am interested in smart design. And I know that when projects are conceived of for the right reasons and implemented thoughtfully and competently, it has an enormous impact on thousands and thousands of people over many years. And so when it comes to transit first, having housing close to transit, having good transit to the commercial corridors, good transit to the neighborhoods where people who don't have access to cars live, so that they can get to work or school or visit family easily. These are basic civic values that I support.
Great. And do you support prioritizing transit and active transportation over car infrastructure?
Well, that just gets into a big situation. Car drivers, and a lot of them are in the merchant community, have a proclivity to, feel under attack. And I just don't quite understand why this becomes such a heated topic. I think it's a lot of it comes out of parking, because people want to use their car and have ready access to, and they want to use their car easily and have ready access to free parking on the other side. And that is, I think that is, I understand why people would want that. It's very convenient, and it's there's a lot there's a lot to want there. But I think it's important for everybody to recognize that we live in an urban environment, and there are many very I would use the word urgent forces coming into our urban landscape. Parklets are one. The tremendous increase in cycling that I've seen in the 30 years that I've been here, the importance for safety, the rise in traffic fatalities, the advent of third-party delivery and last mile solutions, non-professionalized Lyft and Uber drivers, who are all those third-party groups are incentivized to drive in a way that is oftentimes dangerous because of the way their payment is structured. And I do not fault those people for that. Everybody's got to make a living. But it's there's been a lot of change in a short period of time. And so the private vehicles are, people should be able to have private vehicles. And I don't know, I mean, maybe someone on this call could tell me, but I don't know that anyone is saying they can't. It's just that we need to enhance the other modalities so that they are more readily accessible, and you don't have to drive a car because the cost of having and insuring and storing and parking a car is great, and there are less expensive alternatives, and maybe people sometimes are feeling a little trapped in the modality that they're the most used to. So if we can make the other modalities more attractive, more accessible, I think that will be helpful for everybody. That's just my personal opinion, and I know I'm going to learn a lot more as if I am on this board. There's there's a lot to learn, but that's that's my current feeling about that topic.
Right, yeah, and that kind of ties into my next question here, which is that we know that a lot of lower income people, lower income San Franciscans rely on uni to get around. So yeah, like you're saying, improvements to transit service is important to make sure people have equitable access to the city, and especially for folks who can't afford to drive a car, uh, they're able to get around.
For
Uh,
younger people.
that's true, right? People who can't afford it, or for one reason or another can't drive, whether it's age or disability or whatever.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, so last year, the Geary Boulevard Improvement Project was proposed to increase pedestrian safety and improve speed, frequency, reliability along the Geary corridor. But it faced a lot of opposition from merchants who were opposed to the removal of curbside parking. I think was one of the main points of opposition there.
Mhm.
As a board member, how will you balance the needs of transit riders and the opportunity to make transit better so more folks can ride it, especially for lower income folks? How would you balance those needs with merchants' visions for the corridors that they're based in?
Well, I guess I would go back to, what I was talking about earlier, that the outreach piece is very important. I know from my own experience running a pretty high profile store in a small neighborhood. I mean, our business was larger by several orders of magnitude than any other business in the Glen Park commercial district. So whenever we did anything, we had to be very, very careful in terms of our outreach to the wider community. And I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I'm sure we learned some tough lessons. Stepped on some toes. But what I would say I've observed is that there are people who are very active and very, very passionate about their point of view. And then there are a lot of people who have their own point of view, but they're not speaking up as loudly about it. And I think that it's very important to reach out to everybody. The people who are very passionate really need a very patient listener, is sincerely wanting to understand what their concerns are, and talk through the issues. And then the people who are maybe a little bit more reticent needs encouragement to speak up, because it sometimes is the case that people don't want to upset their neighbors by disagreeing with them. But if an environment can be created where people, feel where there's an opportunity for everybody to have a voice, I think that that's extremely important. Um, and and that takes time, and it takes resources. And I know that MTA has a whole arm uh, of staff that works on that. And I don't want to, second guess their methods or their successes. I'm sure there's areas where they've been successful and areas where people have ended up feeling perhaps unnecessarily unhappy with an end result. But I think that that those staff members need all the support that they can get, and I could certainly have feedback that might be helpful. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah. We're at time for SFTR section, so I will hand it over now to Evan to ask you some questions on behalf of Walk San Francisco.
Great.
Thanks, Dylan. Hi, Janet. Yeah, I have the pleasure of asking the questions from Walk SF, and therefore it should be no surprise that the first one is about Vision Zero.
Yes.
Specifically, the fact that the streets with the highest crash rates are concentrated in equity priority neighborhoods. So how will you prioritize the Vision Zero work in those communities?
So I have read through all the materials about Vision Zero. I understand the measures. I probably couldn't list them all effectively right now, but I understand many of the measures that have already been taken: daylighting intersections, and reducing speed limits, and banning right-hand turns. I recognize that that's merely a start. The new state law about daylighting intersections, I think, is going to be another important step forward. And I think that safety needs to be the highest priority. Anytime there is a death or a life-altering injury or even just a traumatic experience having to do with a pedestrian or just a serious collision of two cars, that's too many times. And and it's the awesome responsibility of the MTA to implement the strategies that are known to be effective in reducing and hopefully eventually eliminating those preventable circumstances. I suppose some things may not be preventable in a mechanical failure or something, but what we are talking about, careless driving and people's lives being forever altered as a result, is an untenable situation, and I think we should be doing everything we can. That being said, I know that these are resource-intensive projects, and they don't happen overnight. And when we, this is on the heels of Dylan's question about outreach to communities and how to get everybody on the same page, and that takes a lot of time and and a lot of working through controversial topics and difficult feelings for people, and and of course, not everybody's going to be happy with every result, but I appreciate Vision Zero, and I think that it's tremendously important that that as a city we have been taking steps. They haven't been as fruitful as we would like, but I think we're headed in the right direction.
Thanks for that. The second question, you've kind of talked about outreach a bit, but I think this question kind of hits it straight on, especially when we're talking about, a lot of projects that are going to come across your desk. So basically, what if the agency has a plan, citywide corridor, whatever it may be, does the community outreach needed for that plan, and the neighborhood says, cool, but no.
Hmm. Well, I think that the district supervisors play a role there, right? In, in putting their money where their mouths are. If they're in support of these projects, they need to help smooth the way and be part of that outreach. And I don't. It almost sounds like a legal question, like, can something be done against a community's will? And I suppose it can be, but I'm not qualified to answer that to that part of it. But I do recognize that not everyone is going to be happy with every outcome. I've heard it said that if all of the stakeholders are equally unhappy, that's a positive result in the end. And I think that's probably a pretty good guidepost because San Francisco is a diverse place, and that's one of the really beautiful things about it. And it's a city where I would say I haven't lived anywhere else in a very long time, but where I grew up, the citizenry wasn't engaged in what happened in my town growing up that I could tell. My parents' friends, they were just, doing their thing. Nobody went to any Board of Supervisors meetings to speak up or anything like that. So it takes time. It takes a lot more time. But there's no Vision Zero initiative in the town that I grew up in, I don't think. So there's just some basic, I'm just really proud of us that we do care about these things and we do prioritize these things as a city, because things could be very different. And the fact that people have a lot of feelings, I kind of think that's a really wonderful thing. And if we take the time to listen to each other, there could be a better outcome that results after the feedback process has played itself out. You just don't know.
That's true, and as you're saying, I think you'll soon find that there is a lot of people actively engaged in these issues, and you're going to hear from them, so
I've
including
already
all of us.
at my own
Dylan.
dinner table. It's it's okay.
Well, thank you so much for that. I think now I am going to pass it back to Dylan because we're going to go into our audience questions. So the questions will keep rolling, but that ends the specific questions from the three orgs for now.
Thank you so much.
That's right. So now we are moving on to questions from the audience. Before we get rolling, I think Leanne has the first question. But before we get rolling, I'll just go over again the kind of guidelines. If you have a question for Janet, please submit your questions by sending a message in the meeting chat to the user named questions. That's our question moderator. Only meeting hosts will be able to see what you put in the chat, and we'll work behind the scenes to elevate as many questions as possible. If you accidentally sent your message to me, I forwarded it on to the question moderator, but please try to send them to that questions user if you can. If your name isn't obvious from your handle on Zoom, please include your name with your question, as well as if you represent an organization or if you're a member of either Walk SF, Bike Coalition, or San Francisco Transit Riders. please mention that as well. We'll be working to prioritize questions that address issues within the scope of SFMTA board members, including questions that address policy oversight, values and priorities, and process. As you're asking your question, try to either avoid or explain specialized jargon. We'll also prioritize questions that are likely to be interesting to the whole audience, or we might work behind the scenes to reword any super specific questions so that they're more applicable to Janet's role and the whole audience. So please keep your questions rolling in the chat to that questions user. And I will throw it back over to Leanne to ask our first audience question.
Awesome. Thank you, Dylan. So our first audience question comes from Christy Osorio, who's a member at the SF Bike Coalition, and it's about the budget. So last week, or this week rather, SFMTA's CFO, Brie Marhorter, discussed the $240 million deficit for fiscal year 2026-27 at the board. And there is a regional funding measure being discussed for November 2026. We don't know whether it's going to get passed or not. So, you know, the budget situation is very uncertain. What would your priorities be in balancing the budget?
Oh my goodness. All right. I did have a session. I'm a business owner, so I understand budgets. I understand financial planning. I know how to read a profit and loss statement and the balance sheet and all of that stuff. I have a decent basic finance background. A budget of the complexity of the SFMTA is certainly well out of my depth. And so I really, I do know that, I could just sit here and tell you what I've learned so far. Is what I've learned enough to make a thoughtful statement on how to prioritize the budget? I don't think that would be particularly helpful to anyone in this room. But I would just acknowledge that we have these stated policies and plans, in the Active Communities Plan and the and Vision Zero and probably other things that are more granular, and that following through on something that you say you're going to do as an agency or a business owner, or just as a person in community with other people, is tremendously important. So one thing I've learned is don't add something before that's going to compromise what you've already said you're going to do. So, and that's just kind of a little rule that I try to live by, and and I don't know that MTA ever does do that, or I don't have any specific comments about that, but I see it happen all the time, that something new and shiny comes along and you want to do that, but you forgot that you really need to follow through on something you already said. So I don't know if that's a super specific answer to your question, but that's kind of what I feel comfortable saying.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then this next question comes from Mike Swire, who is a member of San Francisco Bike Coalition. There is currently a proposal to widen northbound Highway 280 between 18th and 5th Streets in order to add an additional lane, which would be an HOV lane. This lane would empty out onto 4th and King, which is a dangerous intersection where a 4-year-old was killed last year, and ultimately increase the number of vehicle miles traveled, including on that road. How would you approach thinking about proposals to add lanes to highways, particularly where they intersect with safety on streets?
Okay, I am just now learning that we have, does MTA have jurisdiction over the interstate system or a say in it? This is a question I don't know the answer to.
It wouldn't apply. I think it's not something that the SFMTA would typically have say over on the interstate. This is something that CTA has been working on. But it will enter out into a city street. It's the off-ramp right onto 4th and King. So I think we can broaden the question to just kind of adding lanes of car traffic in general, be it on highways that exit off onto the city streets or on higher volume roads within the city.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, in the city, the opportunities to add lanes are pretty limited, I would think, unless parking would be removed. Yeah, I'm not a traffic engineer, so it's something I'd really like to learn more about and see data about what actually happens. I mean, there's just so much I don't know. I don't know about how driver behavior is changed when there's a sense of greater ease in getting from one place to another if accidents occur because people get so frustrated that they get to the intersection and then they hurry and take a hasty right turn and then there's a tragic result like I did read about that awful accident that occurred down near the ballpark. It's I mean those sorts of tragedies it's just awful to contemplate. I don't know if I just don't know enough about what contributed to that particular accident. And I drive on freeways sometimes. But traffic is yeah, I mean, I guess my answer is that we have we've made commitments to encourage people to switch modalities, and we have the transit first policy. I would be on the board, and I would have there would be a duty on my part to look at every project through that lens and balance the various stakeholders, and car drivers are stakeholders as well. And if there's a demonstrated need for an additional lane and it can be done safely, that's something that is worthy of consideration. Whether or not I would personally approve it, there's, it's hard to say. But so, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, this next one has more of a positive bent potentially. It comes from Audrey Liu, who is a member of all three organizations. And it is, what is your positive vision of a pedestrian, bike, transit-friendly merchant corridor? Last year, we had night markets popularized by Supervisor Engardio. Is there anything else you would like to see?
Oh yeah, I love those night markets. Oh, do you think, congratulations on being part of all the organizations. That's pretty impressive. Um, I, I think that, creating spaces for pedestrians is a really important part of the civic fabric. Creating places for them to go. I had a meeting yesterday with a gentleman in Glen Park who's interested in, he was asking if our Merchants Association would support some kind of, public gathering place, kind of like what is in Noe Valley with the town square. Things we recently installed festive lighting in our corridor, like a lot of corridors have done, and we feel like that encourages people to feel safe going out at night. And Glen Park has not always been that neighborhood. It's had some rough phases in terms of crime and things like that. So, we were really proud to be part of, just bringing more light. Light is so important. I got to listen to Lydia So come and speak with this group, and I really, really appreciated what she had to say from a design standpoint in terms of what creates the right sort of environment. And I would say that San Francisco has a really wonderful community of designers who are passionate about these topics. And and I say, let them go. I'm just like brainstorming, but let's get more ideas out there, and let them get, and maybe in a little less serious of a way. People are so sensitive. I think just because we've been through a pretty hard, couple of years. Let's just share ideas. they can just be ideas right now, and let them be, have a no judgment forum where people could say, I'd love to have this in my neighborhood, and I'd love to have that in my neighborhood, or or have we this thing doesn't get used for what it was intended to be used for. How about we turn it into that, and let's just get them all out there, and let people, maybe social media plays a role there. I don't know. I'm not a social media user, but there's just so many opportunities to share our ideas and have contribute creatively to the dialogue, and it could help increase positivity, where a lot of conversations have gotten pretty toxic, and so instead of when an idea has legs, that there's a lot of work to be done for it to be successful, but before that, let's just have more ideas, and let's let the best ones come to the top, and let people participate and get as many groups as possible involved with it. And then, as far as what I would like to see, I think that the very serious issues just remain very serious. The safety issue remains very serious, and the access to transit for lower income communities remains very serious. And so, I want to see the serious people working on that. And then, let some of the other stuff kind of get spread around a little bit more. So that's just an idea right off the top of my head, since I got asked that question.
Thank you. Our next question is also from a member of all three orgs, Neville Hemming. And Neville's question is, cars and trucks are getting larger and larger, both in terms of size and weight. We know that larger vehicles pose more risks for other street users, both because their greater mass does more damage and because they also often have worse visibility. So how should the city and agency think about addressing this proliferation of larger vehicles?
Oh, wow. Well, that sounds like regulation to me. About what vehicles you can own or additional cost to those vehicle owners. And I'm hopeful that that's outside of the scope of the MTA's authority, because that would be a very, very challenging political effort on the part of our elected officials, I would imagine. It's easy to come up with, strategies for doing that. And Neville, I agree with what you're saying, that larger vehicles especially in our environment are pose a special risk in an urban environment. And a response from the bureaucracy or the government could be helpful in that. But I don't imagine that I would I can't imagine a scenario, and maybe I don't understand the ins and outs of what the agency does well enough, where I would personally be presented with that sort of some action that would move things in the direction that I think you're talking about. It could be, Leanne, that I'm not understanding the question quite well enough. So please, if there's a way to get some clarification, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think Neville is logged in at this moment. But Neville, if you are, feel free to jump in also. But I think sometimes the agency has, worked with other parts of government, worked with nonprofits, for example, last year, worked with Walk San Francisco and many other nonprofits and governments to advocate for AB 645, the speed safety camera bill. So sometimes SFMTA can be involved in policy things that aren't under the direct jurisdiction of the board and the agency. So there could be thoughts around that. And also sometimes, and of course the agency manages street design and parking, which are related to the size of vehicles and can impact the way vehicles of different sizes move around.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
and I don't want to put, so those could have been things that were part of the question that.
Yeah, that helps a little bit. Leanne, do you know of a legislation that's in development, either at the state or the city level, that would be an example of what he might be talking about?
Yeah, and if someone else remembers at the moment, that would be super helpful. But I know some other cities have done this, and I can't remember what the does anyone remember? Is this on the table right now in San Francisco? DC and Denver have increased fees for larger vehicles to be registered each year. And that is something that may be on the table also in California or in San Francisco.
Okay. Yeah, I generally feel curious and interested in learning more about this, but I don't feel I have the full knowledge to answer with a position about it.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I'm recalling that yeah, it may be coming up in state level legislation at some point. But let's move on to the next question, maybe.
Yeah, thanks, Leanne. My question comes from Christopher Pedersen, who is an SFTR member. And so SFMTA has proposed extending parking meter hours to include evenings and Sundays, which would raise revenue in the face of the pretty significant fiscal cliff that SFMTA is facing in the next few years, as well as encouraging the use of other means of transportation. Christopher is wondering, do you have a position regarding extending parking meter hours to evenings and Sundays?
Well, the board is responsible, has a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the organization or the agency is solvent. And so I take that very seriously. The upcoming I don't know if it's still being called the fiscal cliff, but let's just call it that, since I think people are pretty familiar. I would, say again that this seat is meant for someone from the merchant community, and I am very interested in talking more with people from the merchant community. I have heard both sides of that argument. The one side, people who feel that there are people in the merchant community who feel that parking should be free all over the city. I don't personally agree with that, but there's gradations of feeling that additional cost for parking is diminishes customers' desire to come and patronize businesses, and there's certainly an argument for that. You go to the mall, you don't have to pay for parking. But and there are also businesses that I have spoken with, or business owners that I've spoken with, who feel that greater turnover of parking will be helpful for them. If a customer, or if a not customer comes on Friday evening at 6 and parks in front of your business, and you're open, through the weekend, and that space is taken up that whole time, that could also diminish business, because that parking space won't be available for customers, regardless of what they might have to pay for it. So it's not an easy topic, is what I'm trying to say, and I have given it a lot of thought. I'm pretty concerned about there being muni, and it being as robust as possible. And I don't know enough about all the different revenue sources to make an educated comment about what sources should or shouldn't be explored. but I mean, if it's we can't touch it. It's yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I think there needs to be a thorough understanding more generally of how Muni is funded and what are the various sources of funding. And if we didn't fund it through like if people were able to have the way of no paid parking whatsoever. I mean, if we were to go that far, how would we, what are alternative funding sources for Muni? And it's the government. So, it's so far beyond, I have the kind of budgets that I've ever worked with that I'm really looking forward to learning more. And I want to take all the various stakeholders' needs, feelings, certainly, but needs most importantly into account in the decisions that I make.
Well, I think that's a good segue to this question, which is about a project I'm not only positive you've heard about, you will likely be braced to hear a lot more about. It comes from very Toronto, and it is about the bike lane on Valencia Street, which has been controversial, both among merchants who see it as having hurt their businesses, and active transportation advocates who disagree if the lane is improved or worsens safety. So the question is, what lessons have you drawn from the situation?
Well, yeah, you're right. I've been, I am prepared to talk about it in the sense that I've read everything that I can get my hands on about it, and I've been part of many conversations with people who are on all sides of the controversy, merchants, cyclists, residents, and my own, I've been very transparent with everybody that I have a merchant lens, and I am very concerned about merchant needs. The merchant community generally was, along with many other people, but our livelihoods were very frequently directly impacted and continue to be impacted by the pandemic. I suspect that there are a number of merchants on Valencia Street who feel or actually do not have another pivot in them to try to adapt to rapidly changing circumstances. And this is a circumstance that is, it's not a global pandemic that couldn't be helped. This is something that's being planned and happening, and so I have a lot of empathy for businesses that are struggling. At the same time, I am a cyclist, and cyclist safety is very important to me personally, and I think it's an important topic. And in various other configurations, cyclists are forced to pull out into traffic to get around double parked vehicles on a very regular basis, and it's not safe. So the Valencia, the way Valencia is set up, with the number of lanes that exist there, the parking that exists there, the number of deliveries that happen on that street, the number of parklets that have sprung up since the pandemic. It's a very complex and difficult problem to solve. And as I said, I've read everything that I can about it. And I am reserving making an opinion or forming an opinion until I see the data associated with the impact. There's two specific pieces of data that well, there's a lot of data that I'd like to see. I'd like to see, in actuality, changes to incidents involving cars and vehicles, and just injury or incidents. I want to see how the tax revenue situation, how that reports out business by business, what sorts of businesses are being impacted most greatly, and understand, because every single business is going to have its own particular little situation. If you're on one side of the street versus another side of the street, if you're close to the corner, who you're next to, there are so many issues. But I think we will be able to see quite plainly, that this issue, the impact that it has, but that data hasn't been released by I think it's the Office of the Tax Collector yet. Or there has been some preliminary information released, but it's, you really have to look at the dates. And then the other piece of information that I want to say, it's lost from me right now, is related to the use of the bike lane and the number of cars that are able to go on, and I think that data is very important for everybody to see. I think it is regrettable that it hasn't been, that we haven't seen some of it yet. But that's where I stand on that.
Thank you so much, Janet. The next question is from Will Bondurant. And Will says that one of his frustrations is how long it can take for programs, projects, and streetscape changes to happen. And we've talked about the importance of community engagement, but it's also important to move quickly sometimes. What ideas do you have for how we can make faster decisions and enable the SFMTA to work faster, especially when it would improve safety, climate, or equity?
Oh gosh, how MTA functions and works, I'm really just learning about. I had never attended an MTA board meeting before this. Before this came up, so I attended the December meeting, and I attended part of the meeting earlier this week. And it was a short meeting because they convened to a closed session, earlier than maybe normally. So the actual, functioning of the board, I don't feel like I know enough to, make suggestions. I'm not a sort of person that's shy about making suggestions about, how things should or might work better. I think I'm pretty good at noticing when things are dysfunctional, and I have a lot of experience with creating functional environments. But the level of distrust, I would say, that MTA is an agency that, it's you either love it or you hate it, and it's an easy one to get people riled up and marching down to City Hall to state their opinion, and it's really important to hear those opinions and for the board and the staff. How could the outreach, if you get down to the base of the question, how could the outreach be more efficient? I am certain I'll have some suggestions about that. I mean, that is something that I feel like is, I have a lot of practice with that. I think that one thing that is, that a lot of people feel is missing from MTA, and they would feel more comfortable with trying with the quick builds and other kind of more trial trial projects to see how things will work in reality. There's a general feeling that that people say it's a quick build, but really it's going to be there for 25 years. And the reporting back and it may be happening, but I think there's a feeling that it's not. And I think there might be more trust in and willingness to accept trial things if there's a clearer understanding of when the look back is going to occur and what the metrics are that are trying to be achieved, and whether or not they have been achieved, and a willingness to look at projects again. That could be helpful. But these are just very preliminary ideas on my part, with what limited understanding I have currently.
Cool. You mentioned that you may have a lot of thoughts about making outreach more efficient, and I just wanted to just keep that space open if that is something you want to dive into more, but it's okay if you don't either.
Oh, no, I feel like I've talked plenty about it. I mean, I could, my experience with it feels like a little bit more, like tiny compared to the magnitude of the projects that MTA takes on and the number of people that are impacted by those projects. But I guess I will relay one experience of, it was a street management issue, and we were able to work with someone from the MTA staff, and we thought we had come up with a good agreement, a good solid agreement about the step forward, and then something else happened, and again, this was some years ago, so this may have already been corrected, but empowering I don't know enough about how the organization is structured and people's various roles, but in my world, I would call them line level staff, the people that are working directly with the customers, and empowering them, empowering those voices more, and allowing them to continue a dialogue with an interested party when a decision's being made that is impactful to that party, and a conversation has already occurred. It kind of goes back to doing what you say you're going to do, which I was talking about earlier. And if you can't do what you say you're going to do, go back and explain and talk, and talk about it. Let it be a continuing dialogue instead of just abandoning what you said you were going to do. So.
Thanks, Janet. And I know we're getting close to time now. Do you have time for one more question before we wrap things up?
Sure, if it's a quick one, I've got to get my dinner in me and get to choir practice by
Okay.
6:30
Well,
in Potrero Hill. So
I know Zach Lipton, who's a member of all three orgs, submitted a bunch of questions, so I'll want to get one of his out right now. But yeah, feel free. We'll try to wrap it up quickly afterwards. The question is: San Francisco needs to plan for 82,000 new housing units by 2030. What strategies do you suggest to meet this commitment without putting tens of thousands more cars on the street, creating emissions, gridlock, and parking chaos that our city can't handle? And also, what strategies are there any strategies that you would oppose to that if that's an easier question to answer?
strategies that I would oppose for discouraging cars. I don't think I would oppose any strategies to discourage cars. I mean, access to transit is hugely important, and I think that people who are transit riders will be. I mean, there are car-friendly housing options in San Francisco. So if you wanna have a place to live where you can keep a car, you'll gravitate toward that option. If you don't want the expense of a car or the hassle of a car, and there's easy transit where your home is, that's the home you're going to choose. I won't pretend it's my idea, but I believe it's possible to restrict on-street parking permits based on address. If it's, and I'm not going to present that as my idea, but it's an idea that I heard floated, and it sounded like an interesting one. If there isn't parking in your building and you can't park your car in the street, and you have a car and you want to keep your car, you're going to look for another place to live. And I think that if whatever number of those housing units are transit friendly, that will increase transit ridership, and that is good for everybody, in my opinion. That kind of goes back to what I was saying about like sell it to them, get them interested, and overcoming their fears for trying a different modality. But society is shifting and changing, and I think the new generation coming in isn't so interested in having a car. So that's not by policy. That's just that's how things are changing. So hopefully that answers the question a little bit.
Yeah, thanks so much for indulging our one last minute question.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah. Well, it's been a real pleasure fielding all these questions. They've been very challenging for me. And I hope if I am confirmed that having been able to have this conversation with your members and having more interaction with your organizations will help me be a better commissioner at the MTA. So I just really, before we broke up, I really wanted to express my sincere appreciation for that.
Well, and we want to thank you, Janet, for your participation and your willingness to engage with these questions and these really important issues. It is great that you're stepping forward. It is a public service. So thank you for raising your hand for that. We can also close on that note by reminding everyone here that your nomination goes to the Rules Committee on Monday, the 22nd, and then after that, the full board the following afternoon. I'll also take the chance as we end here to just thank everyone in the audience, everyone who submitted questions. There obviously is no forum without you and your thoughtful questions as well. And thanks to the staff of the Transit Riders, the Bike Coalition, and Walk SF who helped organize this event. But with that, I think we can close. And thanks everyone here for their commitment to making San Francisco an easier and safer place to get around. So I hope you make it on time to choir practice.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Sunday's not going to be fun without practice. Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Good night.